This is the Capitol Rundown.
President Donald Trump's intention was to remain president.
There were officers on the ground.
You know, just when you thought it couldn't get any wackier in the Republican primary for governor, it did.
These are the same green Converse on her feet that turned out to be the only clear evidence that could identify her at the shooting.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Capitol Rundown. I'm Sherry Jones. It was a momentous week in politics in both Washington and Lansing. From gun control to the race for governor, a few stories dominated the headlines. But one of the biggest stories this week was the Congressional Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. They held the first of several public hearings on Thursday night. Investigators called the violence at the Capitol an attempted coup, and they blame former President Donald Trump for the violence. Correspondent Skylar Henry takes us to the hearing.
What I saw was just a war scene.
In its first public hearing, the January 6th House Select Committee presented dramatic testimony from a U.S. Capitol police officer who was injured in the violent insurrection.
There were officers on the ground, they were bleeding, they were throwing up.
The panel blamed former President Trump for the events that day in 2021.
We have a breach of the Capitol.
And during the primetime televised hearing, aired a never-before-seen 12-minute video of the deadly riot.
On the morning of January 6th, President Donald Trump's intention was to remain president of the United States, despite the lawful outcome of the 2020 election.
January 6th was the culmination of an attempted coup.
The committee of 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans presented video statements from supporters of President Trump who face criminal charges in the riot's aftermath.
I did believe, that the election was being stolen, and Trump asked us to come.
The House panel showed Trump administration officials, including former Attorney General William Barr, saying they didn't believe Mr. Trump's baseless claims of a stolen election.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was.
Several days of hearings are planned. Right now, we know of the next 2, scheduled for this coming Monday and Wednesday. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
The Rundown also caught up with Michigan Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin. She spent 5 hours locked in her office at the Capitol on January 6th. She says up to this point, the committee has been tight-lipped, and she's glad they're now taking things public and making it part of our nation's historical record.
We have freedom of speech in this country, and you have the freedom to say, things that aren't very nice. You do. And I will fight for people to have that right to say not very nice things. The minute your freedom of speech ends is when you threaten or use violence. You have no protections for, First Amendment protections when you're threatening someone or when you instigate violence that ends in people's death. So that to me is a line in the sand. And I'm hoping that anyone who helped and carried out violence would be held accountable, just like any other place in our society.
Still ahead, you heard a politician talking about the January 6th committee hearing, but we're going to check in with someone a little less partisan, a public policy expert from the University of Michigan. That's next on the Capitol Rundown. We learned some new details and saw some new video about what happened at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Javed Ali used to work for the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI. He's now a public policy expert at the University of Michigan. Jorma Duran talked to him about what happened Thursday night and now what happens next.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Take me to what we all saw on TV in prime time, no less. What was your biggest takeaway?
I myself wasn't clear how strong of a focus they would have on trying to describe how centrally directed or organized the events of January 6th, or in the run-up to January 6th, were going to be from President Trump himself. But I think if there was any doubt about that going into the hearings, I think the remarks from the members kind of laid that to rest. And I think that was the biggest takeaway, is that from the evidence that they've collected and the facts that they've established and the narrative that they've put forward, that the events of January 6th were responsible because of the efforts and activities of President Trump.
And that was just one of many public hearings that we're about to watch. What then happens next? What are we going to be seeing next?
So if that's really the theory of the case, to use a law school term, then one would think that the next several hearings going forward would have witnesses come forward that support that main argument or that main thesis, that again, President Trump was singly responsible for directing and managing and sort of promoting the events that led up to January 6th. Now, whether that will convince the American public remains to be seen. This is not a legal proceeding either. So there's no legal sort of jeopardy that's hanging over anyone here. What I like to think about this hearing, it's more sort of just setting the facts for posterity and history and having the one definitive narrative of what really happened in a defining moment in our nation's history. Just getting the facts straight from a bipartisan committee, this will be really important.
Thank you, Jorma. When we come back, we're going to take a look at how the January 6th insurrection affected the race for Michigan governor, because it's landed one would-be governor in some hot water. We'll explain when the Capitol Rundown returns. It's been another crazy week in the race for Republican governor as some candidates try to continue their campaigns. Another ends up in custody. We'll start with one-time frontrunner James Craig. The former Detroit police chief was tossed from the ballot by election officials who say that his petition was riddled with fraudulent signatures and that he didn't have enough valid ones to qualify. The Michigan Supreme Court threw out his legal challenge on June 3rd. But 2 days later, Craig went on Fox News and said, quote, "It's not over." And on Thursday night, he told the Detroit TV station that he would continue his campaign, not as the Republican nominee, but as a write-in candidate. And millionaire Perry Johnson is taking action. Fake signatures also doomed his petition, and his appeals were also tossed out by the Michigan Supreme Court last Friday. That was the deadline, as officials need to start printing ballots. But this week, Johnson asked a federal judge to either make them stop so they can add his name, and this Friday, a judge agreed to hold a hearing, quote, "at the earliest opportunity," so stay tuned. And while the Michigan Supreme Court ruled Craig and Johnson ineligible for the ballot last Friday, June 3rd, the court did not decide the fate of Donna Brandenburg until Tuesday, after the ballot deadline had passed. So far, there's been no word from the candidate about whether or not she will continue the fight. Well, the brouhaha over petitions and ballot access that cost 5 GOP gubernatorial candidates their campaigns has led to questions about whether or not we need new laws regarding such petition drives or whether they need to update the old ones. 6 News Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic had a chance to ask the governor about that this week, but she says if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
We've got laws on the books, and candidates are required to follow them.
Well, do you think more laws are needed?
I think people just need to follow the laws that are already on the books in this space.
Well, Tim also checked in with a man who ran elections in Michigan for decades, and he says when it comes to how campaigns pay for people to collect those signatures, there really could be some room for improvement.
Can you eliminate payment per signature and make them move to a salary or an hourly rate? That may be an option, but an outright ban is not an option.
But the big bombshell in the race for governor doesn't have anything to do with ballots. It's about how one of the 5 remaining candidates went from the campaign to custody. That's right. The FBI arrested candidate Ryan Kelly at his home in West Michigan on Thursday. And according to documents filed in federal court, it's because of Kelly's involvement in the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Kelly, who admits to being at the Capitol that day and who was seen in numerous pictures and videos, faces several misdemeanor charges because of his actions that day. So to help us make sense of all this and to talk about the state of the race, we're going to bring in Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic. We'll get his take on the whirlwind race for Michigan governor. That's when the Capitol Rundown continues. As we mentioned, it was another crazy week in Michigan politics. Here to break it all down for you is Jorma Duran and our Capitol correspondent, Tim Skubic.
It's time to get updated politically here in the state of Michigan, and nobody better than this guy right here, Tim Skubic. Tim, so good to see you again. And James Craig, you know, he was thrown off the ballot because he didn't have enough signatures. Well, he's officially made a decision to be a write-in candidate. What you say?
Yeah, you know, just when you thought it couldn't get any wackier in the Republican primary for governor, it did. James Craig, former Detroit police chief who couldn't get his name on the ballot the normal way, now is talking about a write-in campaign, which in the political vernacular is a very, very heavy lift. It's a steep climb. Get any metaphor that you want, any analogy. It is tough to win an election on a write-in. Now, people will say Mike Duggan did it in Detroit. Of course he did. Detroit, last time I checked, is a little smaller than 9 million people across the state of Michigan in a Republican primary. Do the math, boys and girls, and it just doesn't add up. Somebody estimated that it would take $20 million to win a write-in campaign, and Mr. Craig is about 21 million short of that.
Okay, so Tim, Ryan Kelly, he's a governor, GOP governor candidate for the state of Michigan, and he just got arrested for being involved with the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. How does that impact his campaign now?
Yeah, brilliant question, and it's the question everybody is asking. Here's the drill. In a Republican primary, it actually helps, believe it or not. Given all of the Trump voters out there who are anti-government, what better issue to use with those voters than being arrested by the guys and ladies at the FBI? Talk about anti-government sentiment. Now, the question is this. He gets more votes as a result of being arrested. But the question is, does he get enough votes to win the primary? And that is going to be a little bit of a stretch. But it clearly helps him out. He'll be able to parlay this thing. He's already called himself, quote, a political prisoner. He will be seen by his supporters as a martyr. And in a Republican primary where he had little name ID, guess what? He's got it now. It's a fascinating story.
It sure is, and you're fascinating yourself, Tim. We appreciate the update.
Yeah, Jorma, you ought to go into politics.
Thank you, Jorma and Tim. And when we come back, we're going to take another look at one of the biggest stories of the week. We'll tell you what happened on the issue of gun control in the wake of the nation's mass shooting. That's when the Capitol Rundown returns. Welcome back. Along with the January 6th committee and the Michigan governor's race, the other big story this week was about gun control. That's in the wake of numerous mass shootings over the past few weeks. None more heart-wrenching than the one in Uvalde, Texas, where a gunman killed 19 kids and 2 teachers at an elementary school. One of the kids who survived told Congress this week how she did it.
He shot my friend that was next to me, and I thought he was going to come back to the room, so I grabbed the blood and put it all over me.
And emotional moments from actor and Uvalde native Matthew McConaughey, who met with President Joe Biden at the White House and then talked for about 20 minutes about the families that he met, including the parents of 9-year-old Maite Rodriguez.
Maite wore green high-top Converse with a heart she had hand-drawn on the right toe because they represented her love of nature. Camilla's got these shoes. Can you show these shoes, please? Wore these every day. Green Converse with a heart on the right toe. These are the same green Converse on her feet that turned out to be the only clear evidence that could identify her after the shooting. How about that?
As it turns out, Congress did take action this week. The House passed a bunch of measures, including one offered by Michigan Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin. Her proposal, which she introduced in the wake of the school shooting in Oxford, would require gun owners to store their weapons safely so kids cannot get access to them. She talked about her proposal with our own Lauren Thompson.
The bill that I introduced came directly from the specific instance that happened in Oxford, right? We had a family who, knew that their son was having mental health challenges, bought him a gun, left it open and available for him. He grabbed it from home, took it to school, and ended up killing 4 of his peers. And our Oakland County prosecutor is really breaking ground and trying to go after the parents, but there's no law on the books. There's nothing that says that parents can be held criminally liable if their child takes a weapon that was unsecured and uses it in a crime. So we wanted to try and undergird that a little bit with some law and just say, look, you just got to take reasonable, efforts to secure that weapon. Most people in Michigan are responsible gun owners. They understand that. Look, I grew up in a gun owning family. My dad, of course, secures the weapons from the grandkids. I mean, it's just something that most people do. But if you don't, and your child goes and commits mass murder because you just didn't lock up your gun, well, I think you should be charged or have the option of being charged. So that's what it's for. Similar version actually failed in the Michigan Senate about 10 days ago. It's a party line vote. I was very sad to see that. So we're trying to do it at the federal level. It has something to do with your ability to buy a gun. It has to do with personal responsibility once you own one.
Have you found less resistance to this particular bill since it is just dealing with storage, or do you think it's still just that party line vote?
I hope that it's not. Certainly, the constituents in mid-Michigan that I represent are not shy when they don't agree with me. And we just haven't gotten a ton of pushback, right? Because it's not about who gets to buy a gun. It's about how you handle it once you own it and how you protect children. And I think that the average person understands that our responsibility is to protect kids in a society. And this is now the leading cause of death for young people in America.
Now, while the bill passed the House, it's unlikely to make it through the evenly divided Senate, although senators from both parties are talking about a proposal that might get enough support to reach the president's desk. And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown.